Good day, fellow companions. Today, we will be studying why God is no longer relevant in today's modern world. The doctors for today are Dr. Trishan, Dr. Sarah, Dr. Margarita, Dr. Lenny, and myself, Dr. Yaretsi. Why is God no longer relevant in today's modern world? Well, since a lot of citizens and interviewers had been asking us to please document this, we are finally taking note of it. As you know, back then, many citizens used to be well attached to God and religion. They used to praise God, and even they praised Him for rain, sun, and even rainbows. But now we have seen how technology and science have been replacing that, and how God is left behind. In today's documentary, we will be explaining you how are the strengths and weaknesses affecting this in today's modern society. My group members will be explaining all of it, so you will be understanding it quite good as ourselves.
As we've seen, the question of whether God is still relevant in the modern world isn't simple. Both sides, those who argue for God's importance and those who are against it. So in my final part, I will be evaluating the strengths and weaknesses. For many, God gives life a sense of purpose, something bigger than themselves. This isn't something you can measure in a lab, but the emotional and psychological impact is real. Religion can also inspire compassion, community resilience, and a sense of belonging. These arguments remind us that humans don't just rely on facts, but they also rely on values, hope, and meaning. But these arguments also have weaknesses. Morality and meaning can be subjective. Not everyone needs religion to be a good person or to find purpose. And because different cultures believe in different gods, the idea of a universal moral authority becomes complicated. And some argue that relying on God for answers can prevent people from questioning, thinking critically, or adapting to new scientific discoveries. On the other side, arguments against God's relevance highlight scientific progress and human autonomy. As science explains more about the universe, how stars form, how life evolves, and how the brain works, many mysteries once explained by God now have natural explanations. This gives rise to the idea that humans are capable of solving problems independently through reason and innovation rather than relying on divine intervention. These arguments emphasize freedom, the freedom to question, to think, and to build ethical systems based on human experiences rather than religious traditions. But this side also has its limits. Science can tell us how things happen or work, but it all struggles to answer the deeper existential questions like, why are we here, or what is the meaning of life, and or why should we be moral at all? And these are questions of purpose, not just mechanics. And many people feel that without a higher power, life can start to feel empty or directionless. So even in a modern or scientific world, the human search for meaning remains. In the end, the debate isn't just about God, it's about what it means to be human. We live in a world shaped by science and technology, but also by emotion, morality, culture, and identity. Whether God is still relevant depends on how we balance those parts of ourselves. And maybe that's why the question still matters today, because it forces us to think about not just the world we live in, but in the world we want to create.
So, good day. Now we're going to be talking about the arguments against God's relevance and as to why people are starting to lose faith in our modern world in the belief of a God. So basically, scientism is having the knowledge of how the universe came to be by using scientific inquiry, whereby scientists use scientific methods and empirical evidence to show factual evidence on how we came to be into this universe. As our modern society begins to evolve, science also begins to evolve as well. Therefore, as science begins to evolve, it kind of disproves more and more about religion and also the existence of a God. Therefore, people start to lose faith that there is a God in the universe, and therefore they move towards science and rather start believing more in science rather than the belief of a God. Therefore, this kind of contributes to why people nowadays in our modern world are not believing in a God anymore, rather focusing on the belief of science and how we came to be into this universe. So now we will be focusing on the cultural and social change and how this is also contributing to arguments against God's relevance. So as society continues to modernize, the need for God is becoming less and less central in our daily life. So basically, this is due to the fact that people are mostly focusing on their individual freedom, while also, as mentioned previously, they are more focused towards the scientific reasons. This is why now God is starting to become less relevant in everyone's daily lives, as they mostly will try to focus on scientific and also social institutions when it comes to guidance. Instead of trying to look for guidance in a divine creator, they will mostly look towards the social institutions. This is why how culture and social changes will kind of contribute to how they see God and how their minds are developed when it comes to the belief of one. Next, we're going to be taking a look at ethical independence. This basically focuses on morality without God. So, as religious norms begin to decline in society, people tend to develop a secular moral framework. This framework basically what it does is that people tend to believe more in human reasoning, empathy, and universal rights rather than believing in a divine command. Therefore, this shift kind of supports the idea that in order to gain moral behavior, you do not need to believe in a God in order to obtain this. This is why people are able to live ethically independently in society without having the need to believe in a God or religion. Finally, we will be taking a look at the problems with organized religions. These organized religions tend to focus on their religious institutions, such as churches. These churches are where individuals tend to go to listen to spiritual teachings. However, some religious institutions tend to disorient the spiritual teachings, therefore causing mistrust within the community. This is why people tend to step back from these religious institutions, as they could just be exploiting their followers in order for them to come and misuse their power. This is why people tend to avoid these churches and why God is being less relevant in our modern society today. This is why these four arguments tend to contribute to this as well.
Okay, so when it comes to historical context versus modernity, is God still relevant in today's world, in the modern world, in our world? So to further understand, we need to go back a couple of decades. Well, a lot of decades. So in the ancient and medieval times, the belief of God or the belief of gods wasn't just an idea, but it shaped culture. People relied on it. People relied on their beliefs to make moral decisions, to explain natural causes, and overall, religion or their belief of God was the backbone of their community. And religion influenced laws, it influenced education, it influenced leadership, and it overall regulated community. It stabilized the community. But later, the world changed. Globalization happened. The world evolved. The world transitioned. Technology happened, and now we have we have biological factors that now explain a lot of causes. Discoveries in biology, in physics, and chemistry now explain a lot of our of things that are questioned now, but were never questioned back then because of the strong belief in God. They were divine and unquestionable back then. And so from that we can see how the world has evolved in faith
And we can simply ask ourselves, has the modern world has the modern world challenged faith, or has it simply decided to put a factor in it? So because of all of this, modernity influence and modernity began to challenge beliefs. For questions, for example, like, is God real? Is Was God actually the reason for this? um what does God want? And is there evidence of a God? And again, I repeat, things that were unquestionable back then are now being challenged and questioned now. So you might ask yourselves from this, in the modern world, is God still relevant?
In today's modern world, some people think God is no longer important. But even with technology and scientific progress, many people still believe that God plays a big role in their lives. First off, God still shapes our ideas of right and wrong. Many moral values come from religious teachings, and we also see this in real life. For example, like churches and faith groups who still run food pantries, shelters, hospitals, and community programs. Next up, people still look for meaning, reason, and purpose. Science explains how things work, but it doesn't explain why we are here or questions like death, life, and purpose that exist. And many people turn to religion for comfort and guidance. Thirdly, another point is that science doesn't have all the answers. We understand the universe, but we still don't know why it exists. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas said that there must be a first cause, something that starts everything, which many people believe that is God. Finally, religion creates community and support. In a world where people feel lonely or stressed, religion groups give people a place to belong. During example natural disasters, they are the first ones to provide food, shelter, and support. So overall, even though the world keeps changing, God is still meaningful to many people because of morality, the purpose, and big questions that science can't answer, and the sense of community faith provides.
In today's modern world, science explains most things that religion once did. People now build morals through human rights and society functions without depending on God. Because of this, our group concludes that God is no longer as relevant as before. Thank you for your listening.